The Department of Sport, Arts and Culture says it's looking for ways to speed up the disbursement of relief funds to athletes, artists and technical personnel. The minister yesterday admitted that the allocation of funds has been slow. Let's discuss this further. Joining us is the Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture, Minister Nathi Mthethwa. Nyambosa, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate you coming to speak to us. Already acknowledging some of the technical difficulties as far as operations is concerned in administering the fund and ensuring that it gets to the artists in particular. But 200 or so out of 1,050 applications that you have received is an indication to me and maybe to some that you underestimate the kind of problem that you have on your hands, especially considering that there are other artists that did not even apply for this relief.
Well, Thabo, relief is a relief, will always be a relief. It's dependent on what you have at your disposal. There was never a thought or even an illusion from our side that we can offer a relief which would be able to cater for everybody. So the issue with what we have announced as the relief fund is the kind of people who are not at this point getting a nod from the adjudication process to actually access the fund. We've looked into a number of things, and some of them we knew. The time factor, for instance, we understood because it was a new thing. We're doing a new thing under new circumstances which have been imposed on us, and we had to do what we could do. And even now, we are certain that there is no way that funds which are allocated, earmarked for artists, will go back to the fiscus. We'll ensure that at the end of the day, people get the assistance they need.
The feedback so far, Nyambosa, is that the criteria, as you have said it right now, only really a small portion of the creative sector will actually qualify or actually do qualify according to the criteria that you have said. For example, when you're talking about an independent producer or a freelancer, if you don't work, you don't get paid. And as soon as the Disaster Management Act was put in place, those artists did not have an opportunity to even get a contract. They did not have work. They are not booked. So if you have a voiceover artist, for example, that voiceover artist is not on contract. It's booked as per work that is coming in or as per production that is happening at the time. And if that phone is not being picked up to bring in the artist has got no capacity to earn. Did you take that into consideration when you set the criteria of who qualifies for this fund?
Well, we did, including the freelancers. We did take that into cognizance. We also understood that you are not going to have a formal environment where there's an MOU signed and contract and so on. That is why we made provision for anything which would be, including a letter, which will say that this person was in line for this particular kind of job and therefore should be given an opportunity to do that. The fact of the matter is that the core people who would have been, earmarked or targeted for this are the major people who we are concerned with and want to see what is it that we can do so that you still have parameters because you can't just dish out money to people. You still have parameters, but those parameters takes into cognizance the situation under which people are operating or find themselves in.
Minister, can we get clarity by major people? What do you mean? When you say the fund was earmarked for major people, who were you earmarking with that fund?
Anybody who was to have, because of COVID-19, his work has been interrupted. Cancer, who was supposed to perform, somebody was supposed to have an event, and that's across the board.
But this is what I'm trying to explain to you, Minister, to say there are artists, there are creatives who would not have had an event planned. There are artists who would not have had an MOU planned, but they work on a call basis. They get called as and when work is available to them. And as soon as work became unavailable because of the lockdown situation, those artists don't even have a prospect of an MOU or a call being directed at them.
Absolutely. That's why I'm saying that based on the criteria, definitely some people would not be covered. The criteria is not going to cover everything.
And how are we going to respond to those artists? You have artists also, for example, who are saying the visual arts platform. Did you consider them? Did you make provision for them?
You know, when you look at the broader criteria, there would be very few people who would not be covered. Because when we look at the visual part of it, the live streaming and so on, there was no limit on that. And any South African who felt that they could do that, freelancer or somebody who's full-time in what he or she is doing, was eligible to apply for that. There was nobody who was barred from applying for that.
Was it an oversight on your part as government to literally ignore an entire part of the sector? Literally, you've got freelancers right now with no prospect of getting relief, but they're also not able to earn any income during this lockdown.
But you see, what you are saying cannot really be the absolute truth, because there are people who are freelancers who have applied in this process, in one way or the other, who have been able to say, I was going to be doing this, that, and the other. And therefore, to say that people have been wiped out altogether cannot necessarily be the absolute truth.
One of the reactions that has come through from the various artists' organizations is that the 150 million in itself will not be enough, especially capped at 20,000 rands. The artists and their obligations and what they need to pay for will just not go far enough.
Well, it's not going to go far enough, but it is making a difference. And this is what we have. And based on what we have to share what we have, this 150 million rands. We are stretching it as much as possible so that it gets to anyone. It's very rare that you'll have a situation where you'll have enough, especially if you take a sector as diverse as the creative and sporting sector. You really would need to have billions of rand to say, well, it is enough. We knew from the beginning that 150 million rands can never cover the entirety of the sector.
You're talking now, Minister, of a second wave of applications and considering how you're going to particularly adapt the criteria for that portion that was adjudicated, where the adjudicators were like, maybe we could consider this one, maybe if we amend here or there, they might be able to fit the criteria. How exactly is that going to work?
Well, what I was sharing yesterday is what the feedback from the industry, especially organizations in the industry, they were proposing that. So I can't say much on that, Thabo, because we are having a meeting with the industry tomorrow So we'll take things from there. But I was merely expressing what they would have faced with the department, especially noticing that the people who desperately need assistance in one way or the other did not make it. But even if you modify or you do anything, there has to be some requirements. There has to be some parameters.
Now, with the opening up now of proposal for live stream productions, there seem to be maybe no clarity of exactly what are you looking for. You speak of a criteria of collaboration between legends and new artists. You speak of a criteria where the production would be educational, still have some entertainment value. What exactly are we looking for as far as productions are concerned?
Well, we want to have artists in this country expressing themselves through their artwork, whatever comes to them, which is going to be of benefit to society. We're not going to be very restrictive in or dictating what should they be having as production and so on. As long as all the productions are going to have the message of the day about the fight against this pandemic, as long as it's something which, when the adjudicators sit down, will find value in those productions, because in the final analysis, the value of what people would be producing will trump everything, especially taking into cognizance the epoch we find ourselves and the contemporary challenges we're faced with.
So some production houses and independent producers are saying they already had scripts on the cards which they had to park because of the lockdown. Those scripts that had already been worked on don't necessarily contain, for example, a COVID-19 storyline, that they would only be able to consider or even incorporate that storyline a couple of months down the line. So we'll only begin to see that storyline on our screens in a month or two.
That's not going to be in any way an obstacle for them. As I said, the most important thing is that it should be productions which would add value to the progress of South Africa, to issues facing the country. And when the adjudicators sit down and feel that in here there is no storyline of COVID-19, but there is a storyline which is going to be educating our society in a correct way, that then will be taken on board. Remember that sometimes it doesn't necessarily have to be within or in the storyline. It can be as part of the edition, wherever they are doing or producing their work, and have a way of raising the issue of COVID-19, that will still be accepted.
Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture, Nathi Mthethwa, we appreciate your time. Nyambos, siyabonga.